My name is Abel Knipping. I work at Witveen & Bos and I'm an impact assessor and stakeholder manager. Before introducing this webinar, I would kindly like to refer to you the webinar rules. We ask you to please mute your microphone, close your video, and please, if you have any questions, also during our presentations, post them in the chat. I'm your host today, and I will make sure that your answer is answered by the person giving a presentation. So what are we going to do? Well, we came up with this idea because of the crazy time of Corona. And Chris, Gabriella, Jacobina, and me have worked together in several projects. And we said to each other, why not bundle some of the videos we already have on the shelf and share them with our network? And that's what we're doing in this webinar. And each video will be introduced by me, and afterwards there's a short Q&A with the person who gave the presentation in the video. All videos are related to social inclusion in infrastructure projects, but each video has a different, different type of content, different details that are addressed. And actually, we start our journey with Chris Jones. Chris Jones is located in Geneva, Switzerland. And Chris has worked at Kuiper Compagnons, but is currently working at Feeding Cities. Well, and Chris is always looking for solutions to make our cities more livable. And in the following presentation, Chris will take you on a journey and he will try to answer one of the biggest and most challenging sustainable development goals, namely that of food security. Well, food security is pretty relevant during a lunch webinar, of course. We hope all your food is secure, that you have a nice boterham with pindakaas or something at your hand. Please sit back, relax, and be inspired by Chris from Geneva. Remember, questions, post them in the chat. Thank you.
Big challenges in fast-growing cities often require major infrastructure interventions, which can bring significant disruption to the lives of many millions of people. People have greater awareness of issues and their rights. They have increased access to media and social media outlets to express opinions, concerns, and suggestions. Without the right forms of community engagement, infrastructure projects can quickly become highly sensitive and highly controversial, resulting in delays and seeing problems exacerbate rather than being resolved. However, infrastructure projects can also offer many opportunities to enhance the quality of life for all groups, including vulnerable people. By finding synergies, creating spin-off and additional benefits, it is possible to accomplish win-win situations, empowering people to become engaged contributors to solutions. In my career, I have worked on a wide range of projects across the world, from the iconic, award-winning Titanic Museum at the heart of Belfast Docklands renewal, to town centre enhancements in the Netherlands. In New Delhi, India, I worked as a lead landscape designer for the AeroCity project. Here, we looked to create vital urban pedestrian spaces. I have worked on strategic visions, exploring how our towns and cities may adopt an energy-neutral pathway with resilience and food security at the core, and schemes intertwining nature-based solutions alongside visions for responsible rural development. In Rajasthan, India, I worked with a village sarpanch to explore ideas for enhancing resilience. Solutions to help them become less reliant on expensive food, water, and fuel imports, and to find tools that would give them a more optimistic future. Semarang in Java, Indonesia, suffers from subsidence caused by groundwater extraction, from flooding, and from water pollution. We developed ideas to place water back at the heart of the community rather than waterways being hazardous, neglected dumping grounds. Everything we do should contribute towards tackling some of the big challenges we're facing. Where can we have the most impact? How can we empower people to contribute more inclusively? When I moved to Geneva, Switzerland, the SDGs were high on the agenda, with sustainable food systems at the core. I attended the launch of Drawdown in Switzerland, the most comprehensive plan ever proposed to reverse global warming. Food systems right at the top of the solutions with the greatest potential impact. The Ellen MacArthur Foundation launched their Cities in the Circular Economy for Food at Davos. Once again, food systems at the heart of solutions to build a better future. There's a changing narrative, the current COVID situation heightening this, from food security to changing diets to a desire to reduce and avoid food waste. This is part of a broader change. The COVID crisis and restrictions on movement, concerns about virus exposure, physical distancing implications, and so on, are making people search locally grown, reliable, easy-to-access food. Food system innovators are finding creative ways to better connect supplier, producer, and consumer. Increasingly, food production is being woven back into the urban fabric, offering great opportunities to find, develop, and utilize urban synergies for food production, waste avoidance, job creation, energy generation, rainwater management, the circular economy, and more. Urban areas are full of spaces that are not working as hard as they must. Future City Hub is an integrated urban element that connects urban synergies across many different functions, activities, businesses. It can effectively help to tackle challenges and contributes to achieving a broad range of aims and objectives. So we need to understand the big picture, the big challenges, planning systems, location-specific considerations, demographics, economies, and more. But we must also co-create the building blocks, working closely with all stakeholders to inspire and empower people. Feeding Cities help to analyze but also visually communicate current situations with an exploration of the backstory, to understand how places and situations evolve, and to be able to understand the complexities of physical, social, environmental, and economic networks. What happens when this becomes this, or this becomes this. We cannot just start with a building, space, or waterway and its direct location. We need to understand the broader picture, understand the context, find missing links and opportunities. This means understanding systems and identifying all the components and stakeholders within systems. Images like this are shocking, yet situations like this are increasingly commonplace. But why does it happen? Clogged waterways mean environmental degradation, health threats, flood risk. Yes, we could perhaps dredge, but if we don't stem the flow of waste into waterways, then what's the point? And blaming pollution on the immediate context is not always the full picture. But understanding the local food systems is a major part of understanding the flows of waste in an area. Daily wages may mean daily purchases of packaged products rather than weekly or monthly bulk purchases. This may mean more waste. Poor drinking water supplies may mean more bottled water. And whilst fresh food may have no packaging, transport distances and poor storage may mean too much is wasted and food is not as nutritious as it should be. The connection between production, processing, and consumption offers many exciting synergies. How can we close loops? Can food waste become plant fertilizer and biogas for cooking? Can this help to avoid other fuels contaminating water? We should not only focus on moving towards more technological practices, but also explore what existing or traditional examples offer. How can we build resilient and inclusive futures? Urban farms can bring employment, food, community, education, and opportunity to the heart of urban areas. And if we can find ways to use wastes, then people can be incentivized to dispose of waste responsibly. To be truly effective, we need to find solutions and possibilities that work for all people, so that everyone can find a way to turn challenges into opportunities that benefit their individual situations, whilst also contributing to the big picture. Local solutions may have the biggest impact when they're linked to local skills, traditions, and materials. When we embrace this, we have the chance to create many social, economic, and environmental benefits. Solutions might be quite low-tech or more advanced. After the analysis, understanding, and exploration comes the point where ideas have to land. This must be done with the people who will be affected and for whom interventions will either turn out positively or not. Build the vision together, identify the major issues, their causes, local challenges, create the framework for change, work across all layers of society to achieve the best possible results. In summary, we need proper analysis and understanding to get the right tools and techniques through communication and collaboration and an inclusive process, so we can move from a position of fragility towards a chance to grasp opportunities.
Well, great to see all the communications in the chat. Are there any questions for Chris? Chris, thank you for sharing this interesting presentation. And if everything works, we will see Chris on the screen now. Yeah, I see Chris in Geneva.
Hi.
Let's have a look at the chat. Greetings from Wageningen, greetings from Rotterdam. And so far, I don't see any questions to your presentation, Chris. Chris, I do have a question myself. Since I see that many of the ideas that you propose about changing our food system are mainly localized to those with higher income, how do we make sure that food security is also given to those with lower income or, well, lower social status in our society?
Yeah, that's a good question. And recently I was joining with Samantha Supaya, who is based in Manila. And together we're looking at a call for action called the Food Security Jugaad. And Jugaad is a Hindi word meaning frugal innovation. Because, yeah, most people don't have access to a lot of resources. There's a lot of examples across the Far East, across Africa, where people are growing locally in the slums, using things like sack farms, which can be really basic. In Europe, you have these containers for growing on your balconies now, which are giant sacks. In African slums, it's quite commonplace that people use any kind of containers or bags that they can find to grow food in. What we do have to be careful of is where are they sourcing the water and the soil from? Is that contaminated? That's where we try to help look at what is available, what help is needed to get that working properly. But there are some very effective low-tech solutions that we can find.
Yeah, and actually waste can be generated into material that helps producing food, right? We see in your ideas, in your pictures. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, and you can also, as long as you work with the community, you can find ways to redistribute, animal waste from, the excrement, from food waste. People can collect stuff either to make containers or to make compost. And finding out how that all fits together in a network is actually crucial to, understanding how to do it best.
Yeah. Well, I see no further questions in the chat, so I propose we continue. And Chris and I work together in Semarang, Indonesia, and that's the topic of the next presentation. In Semarang, Semarang is faced by subsidence and sea level rise, land subsidence and sea level rise. And for that, the city is looking to solutions to cope with these challenges. And one of the solutions is the recanalization of the city. Well, in this recanalization, we did a study to better understand the social issues related to this technical project. And the next video shows you how 8 teams by Frank van Klee from the Rijksuniversiteit Groningen helped us to understand the stakeholders. This video was taken for the massive open online course of Delft, and it's recorded 2 months ago. Same shirt, but a different non-corona haircut. So please enjoy.
Is the only function of a canal the transfer and capture of water? Is its value only expressible in the number of floods it prevents or the number of boats that use it? We are in a paradigm shift. Projects with a singular 100% technical focus are getting smaller in number. Instead, you see focus is shifting from functional and financial aspects to societal aspects, added value and chances that arise besides the project's main goal. Integral projects also take the social aspects of infrastructural development into consideration. They provide an opportunity for the local community to participate, discuss, and contribute ideas. But an infrastructure can have many effects on society as well, some positive and some being negative. Assessing these impacts of an infrastructure project on the natural environment has been researched, institutionalized, regulated, and explained in textbooks for years. But how do we assess an infrastructure project's impact on the social environment? Well, that's difficult because social structures are fluid, subjective, and hard to grasp. Frank van Klee identified 8 themes which we use to describe the social context. By assessing each of these themes and speaking to local stakeholders about the potential impact of an infrastructure project on these themes, we are able to assess potential social impacts in the early stages of a project. I will explain these themes through the example of a water as leverage project in Semarang, Indonesia. Water as leverage proposed the rechanneling of parts of the city in order to increase its climate resilience. Theme 1, way of life. Assessing the impact on this theme involves asking questions like, how do you spend your day? How do you earn your money? And do you see economic opportunities when this infrastructure development takes place? In Indonesia, people replied with, I sell rice on the market, to the second question. Others identified a preferred new market structure instead. The theme culture. Questions are similar to, what are important cultural expressions for you? In Semarang, the Wayang Puppet Theater is an important cultural asset, providing a means of addressing social issues. Community. Do people in the community help each other? Who are the most vulnerable people in your community? How will the project impact your community? Well, this market was an important place for the community of Semarang to meet and enjoy the leisure time they have. People also identified the shortage of proper public spaces to meet each other. Political systems. Do you participate in decision making? Do you trust politicians? In Semarang, many people were not confident that the local authorities could solve the problems they had. Environment. What are the main environmental issues in your community? We found that waste was disposed in this canal and that the market's toilets flush into the canal as well, causing environmental pollution issues. The theme health and well-being. We ask questions like, how is the health system organized? Who is your doctor? How near is the nearest hospital? One of our interviewees indicated the importance and benefits of the Kelurahan, meaning community, healthcare program. Personal and property rights. How are the lands divided? Are you concerned that you will be negatively economically affected by this intervention? People in Semarang indeed feared that they would suffer loss of income after a potential relocation of this market. Others saw opportunities for a shift in the market's organization. For the theme fears and aspiration, what future do you see for your children in your community? The main aspirations the people in Semarang had were to increase security, sanitation, waste management, and harmony in their community. And so we see that talking to people and gathering subjective information on these 8 themes about community structure helps in identifying potential opportunities for our infrastructure design. And these potential opportunities include local people. They help to avoid threats that are easily missed or disregarded when designing infrastructure only from behind our desk. Let us take this example of Semarang, Indonesia. In this city, we conducted interviews with local people. They told us they missed a communal area in their neighborhood, a proper public place to meet. So instead of merely creating a big and broad canal that fulfills the need to drain floodwaters rapidly, we designed the canal to also have space and facilities for this community to meet each other when the water level is low. So we see that a canal is more than just a functional flood drainage system. It can be a catalyst for social well-being, even a catalyst for a city's attractiveness.
Still looking to the chat, and I see no further questions to this presentation. In the meantime, when you think of a question, I am sharing a link with you in the chat to the NL Inclusive Infra Manual. This manual was made together with the Building with People network, and this manual gives you a broader explanation of the method we applied in Semarang. And this method is easily understandable, easily accessible. It consists of a couple of steps that you take in your project, and it really helps you in understanding trying to understand the local social context. I see a question from Bobby, if the plan has been implemented. Well, the project was part of the Water as Leverage project, which is in itself still a conceptual project looking to solutions to climate change in, I think, 5 different cities in the world. And this study was also a best case example study to show how once starting to implement the project, the social stakeholders can be taken into account in your project. So it's kind of a best case example study. This is also what we notified to our stakeholders in the communication, and that it was conceptual, that measurements were not going to be taken, but it might be that in the near future there will be. Yeah, Yuri Nijse notes that the inclusive project seems more expensive as well. Do you feel like governments in poor countries have the money to invest in such projects? Yeah, Yuri, good point. That's always one of the arguments you get, that these projects are more expensive. Well, it's our opinion that projects like these actually have better social support, so less protest against your project. They have a better outcome, which is not always measurable in money, but it is measurable in life expectancy, in happiness. It does stay difficult to well, let's go to your question, to activate local governments to see this, and money is often scarce. So it's a business case you really have to sell, but we are really confident that it's even cheaper, or possibly cheaper. No delays, happy stakeholders. A lot of questions. That's very nice. Thanks a lot. A bit too much to answer at this time. We will try to answer them soon, but seriously, in 1 minute we will have to go to Jacobine, so I'll pick out another question. Yeah, a question by Nienke Schaap. How do you ensure as foreign researchers that you are able to get the right information and also really understand and analyze this information? Good question, because you never go there by yourself, of course. We have worked together. I actually kept a lot of distance in Semarang, and 2 local researchers did all the questionnaires. We had a local person who knew a lot about the governmental situation that taught us about that. And we always try to work together with local companies that know the context way better than we do, and that don't look with the Western glass that we might have on our face. So always beware of social and local cultural context, of course. It's unfortunate that we cannot answer all questions. Maybe a final one by Nagar. Based on what those 8 teams are formulated for assessing social impacts? Yeah, Nagar, please refer to either Frank van Klees, his papers, the researcher in Groningen, or to the NL Inclusive Infra Manual. It's all explained there. So for further info, please go there. And let's move on to Jacobine Ritsema, a colleague of mine who has worked for 20 years on social issues, social impact assessments, and she always knows how to address the social side in our, sometimes pure technical projects. Jacobine takes you on a journey to Sierra Leone, where she did the hydropower project. And please beware, because afterwards Jacobine is going to ask you a question in the poll. Jacobine, go ahead.
So I'll be telling you about a feasibility study on small hydropower in Sierra Leone. This is a map of Sierra Leone and its rivers. The potential locations for hydropower were identified based on a desk study, and the best locations are indicated by symbols such as the green dots and the red stars along the rivers. Sierra Leone is significantly short of power generation capacity now, as well as in the short and medium term. So a Dutch company intends to install hydropower infrastructure in 2 initial locations with a targeted power production of 3 megawatt each, or if possible, 1 initial location with a targeted power production of 6 megawatt. Subsequently, more locations will be implemented to achieve a target power production of 75 megawatt or more. So each of the 6 potential power station locations has been studied by a team of biologists, ecologists, fishery experts, land use planners, and social scientists. The surveys and analysis have all been conducted in accordance with performance standards of the International Finance Corporation, the IFC, the Equator Principles, and environmental impact assessment requirements of the Environment Protection Agency in Sierra Leone. And a first field visit revealed that the pre-selected locations are promising in terms of potential power generation. Very promising. However, the first field visit was during the rainy season. So during the second field visit in the dry season, all locations were assessed as providing too little power, given the current design. Very little flow indeed. But what does this mean for the proposed infrastructure? Stakeholder identification revealed that there is a designated protected area, rich in biodiversity. This is the gallery forest along the river that provides corridors for the movement of large mammals, antelopes, deer, and bush pigs, and habitat for birds and butterflies. And they are also visited by groups of primates, including, on occasion, chimpanzees. And there's also a surrounding population and housing near the river. There is river use for laundry and sanitation purposes. There is sand mining, and there is diamond and gold mining. Furthermore, there is fishing, and there is farming. So what we did, we performed modeling to identify the risk of flooding. And what happens upstream if you construct a weir of 3 meters or 6 or 9 meters high? And you can see from the shaded areas that there is flooding. And our impact assessment results showed that there are many consequences for people and their living environment. So the red areas indicate potential major negative impact for fish migration, fish stock, and community safety. And the impact assessment further shows that there's a major negative impact on the important gallery forest and a loss of livelihood for sand, diamond, and gold miners. The full implications of the anticipated changes are explored with stakeholders to establish both consequences, potential opportunities, and possible mitigation measures for hydropower infrastructure.
Yeah, so I have a question for you all to make it a little bit more interactive. One of the 8 themes is the way of life. The 8 themes, what Abel was talking about. And I have a question. I will just launch a poll in a minute. If you consider the theme way of life, which of the following statements do you consider false? So you can check whichever you want. You can check multiple answers. So which of the 3 statements do you consider false? 1, 2, 3, all of them. One is about fishing, the other is about mining, and the third is about diamond and gold mining. So I will start the poll and give you the answer in 2 minutes. Please think about it and fill it out. 5 seconds, and I'll close the poll. So thank you very much. Thank you for voting in this poll, and I'm very happy with the crowd. So what we have, what I would like to answer, that all the effects actually on the way of life of the river community need to be considered when you assess the implications of this intervention. So it's not the place of the assessment team to sit in a judgment on the river community. And so you cannot exclude issues that you consider illegal or ecologically damaging. So you have to take them into account. Another thing is that, of course, if you see them, if you can and see things that reveal things that could harm the community members, in a later stage you can address them. But in this stage, in the impact assessment, you would have to look at all the possible impacts. So let me show you, share a short video of what we did as a result. Please.
Once the full implications of the anticipated changes are explored with stakeholders, a number of mitigation measures were proposed. For instance, building fish-friendly turbines or restricting the design to acceptable weir heights so that upstream water levels are acceptable. This is not an easy decision. A lower weir height means less profit for the investor. Even with such mitigation measures in place, some of the effects on the community still remain severe and would imply resettlement. The overall conclusions of the environmental and social impact assessment indicate that some sites are suitable for hydropower infrastructure development and others are less suitable or not suitable at all. So by involving the community in the assessment at the feasibility stage, the construction of infrastructure that is unfriendly to people and nature is avoided, minimized, or mitigated. And this is one of the ways how we support the Sustainable Development Goals.
Yeah, Jacobine, thanks a lot. Let's wait for some questions to flow into the chat. There are no questions posed yet, neither any hands that we can see, of course. Well, that's the thing of holding a digital Zoom meeting, the Zoom silence.
I think we can proceed to the next video.
Yeah, let's proceed. Then we swiftly move to Copenhagen, and this feels a bit like a Eurovision Song Festival. With Gabrielle Factor working at Community Insights Group, is located in Copenhagen. And Gabriella is a specialist in international social impact management, in consultancy, and in training. And in the following video, Gabriella will show you the power of maps. She will introduce you to human rights issues and gender equality. Unfortunately, Gabriella cannot attend the Q&A afterwards, but her colleague Anna Maria Esteves can. So if you have any questions, please feel free to post them during the video in the chat. And let's enjoy the last video of today.
The first thing I do when I have to look at a project and I have to investigate for due diligence or for an impact assessment is to look at the maps. Sometimes you will get the maps provided in the impact assessment or the documentation provided by the project, but I normally always use a free access satellite images like Google Earth or similar products, and I go directly to the area and I start to look to the small, close to the project area or the area of interest and even broader. So I can have an idea who lives there, what do they do, what are the access area, which are the natural resources, who lives where. And that helps me to have an idea, a major sense, but also to be sharper on which are the questions and things to be looking at. Is some information that is missing or not? I'm going to show you an example. This is a map showing one part of the wind farm in South America. Here we can see the turbines, and this is the access road that need to be built in order to bring all the equipment and then to have the maintenance, etc. So all of that require acquisition, access to land, to acquire properties or part of the properties. So one of the things that we did was to identify which were the properties and who were the owners, and to indicate which of them the land acquisition has proceeded, was in order, and which of them they have conflict. And of course, the ones that are in conflict are the ones we want to interview. But also we could take, with the same tool, we can take a closer look and to see what is actually inside the land. Are they being compensated for everything that is there? And so we can produce a kind of summary for the ones that seems to have some problems, or we need to make sure that there are not problems. For example, to say, here's going to be a house that needs to be destroyed. And is there anything else in that property that needs to be compensated? So we identify who's the landowner and we can have a conversation. And in that way, we could identify, for example, that there were some places for husbandry that were important part of the livelihood of that family were not included in the compensation package. And actually, the family didn't know that they have the right of being compensated for that. So maps are interesting because you can have with high technology, but also very low technology. For example, we have done when you need to understand property, use of natural resources, you can, in the place where it's allowed, you can use drones just to film from outside and then show it to the community, and they will indicate, this is my house, this is my land, this is how we go, etc., etc. But also you can go completely down to earth with only a piece of paper, some markers, some papers, or even in the sand, and build together what we call participatory community maps. And when you do a participatory map, you can start by small steps, like asking, do you draw your community here? And then you start adding the questions. For example, where are the water resources? Where do you live? Where are your fields? How far are they? It is dangerous to cross the road. Who lives here? Who lives there? And in my experience, it's very interesting to do this exercise with men and women separately, because you will get a very different information. For example, this is a case in Western Africa where we needed to investigate the sources of water. And this one was the map produced by a group of women in the community. So they could tell you the orange ones are the wells where they were taking water. And they will tell you which one they were good, which one they were not using because the water tasted funny, and which one they were very fancy but they were not working. But the rest of the information about the infrastructure of the community was very poor. And you can see that here we have to use stickers because most of the women could not read and write and were very uncomfortable even drawing because they didn't have that much practice in holding the pens. But then we asked a group of men in the same community to draw the community and to identify the water wells. Funny enough, here the match is much more comprehensive, and they were not always showing what is the current infrastructure, for example, the church, the houses, but also where there were the plans for the community. Here we're going to build the house for the teacher. Here is the future health center, because they were involved in making the decision about the future investment of the community, which was an information that the woman didn't have. On the other hand, when we asked them, and what about the water wells? Well, they told, oh, we don't have any water well in the community, but we would like to have one. Funny enough, the building in which we're holding this meeting and where we're doing this map with the men, there was one of the water wells just in front of that building. They just never pay attention and never realized there was a water well because they are not the one fetching the water. Participatory maps can also be used, for example, for the identification of vulnerable groups during the interviews. One question that I always make when we're doing these maps is where the best place to live and why? If because of the light, access to water, safety, whatever. And also, where is the worst place to live and why? This because of pollution, because lack of services. And then you ask who live there? Who are the group of people who live in the worst place of the town or the city to live? And then you would more likely find some of the some of the vulnerable groups in the community.
Well, interesting to see how easy small questions can help you a lot in your impact assessment. There are a few questions, and Anna Maria is present. I see that she shared her video. Anna Maria, I see two questions. First, let's start with the question from Sliuzas. She asked quite in the beginning, would it not be better to decide upon the route for the road with the local community?
Hi, everyone. Thank you, Sliuzas. So, yes, in an ideal world, it would have happened. What was the reality with the project that Gabby was describing is that this was a lender's due diligence, which came at a point in the a bit further down the conceptual design than would have been ideal. So with hindsight, this deciding on the route would have happened earlier, where there was an established community engagement process. This was more of an afterthought, unfortunately. So it really highlights the importance of starting as early as possible.
Yeah, great. So, Yusuf, we hope this answered your question. If not, please join the conversation, and you can unmute, I think.
Yes, the value of land. So this is a really good question. So if you are sort of looking at land acquisition and economic displacement impacts from the perspective of IFC Performance Standard 5, or even from a human rights sensitive perspective, if you're a project that says, yes, we have a commitment towards the United Nations Guiding Principles for Business and Human Rights, you would consider everything that goes into how that livelihood makes a living. So you would not only look at the loss in terms of assets, where there are local regulations that set the values of these things, but you would look at also everything else that it would take in order to look at the effects on their food security and their income security. So doing looking at what it will take in order for that household's livelihood to be restored are also analytical questions that happen upfront. Unfortunately, the type of question that Chris has posed is often a compensation add-on type of question that gets thought of after all of the valuation discussions are had, and it's just something else that gets added to an entitlement matrix. I think, Chris, what you're asking for is really these should be questions that should be asked up front and be factored into something like a resettlement policy framework, which would set the framework for the project development. Hope that helps.
Yeah, great. And two more questions from Jacobine and Wiert Wietsema. Start with Jacobine. Jacobine shortly asked, how you do not miss any stakeholders? And
Yeah,
how do you
so I
adapt
think
them?
the important thing here is, you know, the video was about maps, but maps are only one small component to the whole scoping phase. So that a map does not give you a thorough indication of who are your stakeholders. Whatever you identify in Google Maps or whichever software you're using needs to be validated in the field. So the
It's a starting
validation,
point. Yeah.
yes, it's only a starting point, and a map is not going to let you know, for instance, what, like Jacobin was mentioning, you know, what people's future plans are for the area, or if there's any land use conflicts between different groups, or if there's, for instance, what you're seeing is communal land for grazing, and maybe there are migrant workers that are coming in from elsewhere, and they're a more vulnerable group. So you have to be able to ask this so in terms of making sure you don't miss any stakeholders. One methodology I like, there are many, is to get onto the ground and ask us a key informant, which 10 people should I speak to? And then you go and speak to those 10 people, and you ask each one of them, which 10 people should I speak to that are actually potentially affected or have an interest? And you keep going until there aren't new ones that are
Okay, that's a nice question to Jacobine's question, and even a question I think that was posed to my presentation as well, a method of involving everyone. The last question, and what I found interesting in his presentation, is that Gabriela is saying that she's not asking to the most vulnerable social groups, but she's asking to which are locations that are good and not good to live. And Wiert is asking you, what are possible indicators that determine where it is a good place and where it's not a good place to live? Do you have clear indicators, or is it more a gut feeling?
Well, I think there is so if we're going to turn the focus of a social scoping on its head, so that you're putting people at the center of the analysis rather than the project at the center of the analysis, which is what often happens. If you put people at the center of the analysis and you try and understand what is it that contributes to their well-being, which is, yes, it's context specific, but there are some dimensions that are pretty generic. So it can be health, it can be social capital, it can be access to physical and social services and infrastructure, can be access to land, access to property, quality of housing. So so there are some generic dimensions, and of course a bunch of livelihoods type of indicators, as well as quality of the living environment. So there are frameworks out there that can make sure that you are covering all the right topics, but the development of indicators from a social scientist perspective is done completely bottom up, because it needs to be something that reflects people's values, their aspirations, and what is good from their perspective, rather than sort of being flown in from Mars.
And I think the teams of Vencle help you to structure the bottom up input. They help you to well. Yeah. There's a question from Daniel Oudeken. And shortly summarized, Daniel asked us the question: should we not also give consideration in the benefits of local bottom-up projects developments and facilitate those, because they often look externally financed? Jacobine, would you like to answer the question?
Thank you. I was just opening my video and microphone because it's an important question. Chris also answered that yes, the answer is yes. Of course, we are mainly involved when there is an externally financed project, but then we try to also do participatory design. So really in early possible stages, go speak with the most important or representatives and try to have their input bottom up, not only in words but also in designing, which is not also always possible. It depends, very much depends on the stage you're in a project. But yeah, when we have master planning, feasibility, then there's lots of things that are still possible. So that's what really we are struggling for, to become involved in those stages. And also we try to work with organizations that, that initiate projects or try to influence them, like Slum Dwellers International, you might know. So in order to have a maximum of input, bottom up.
Great, and then I see Chris's video starting for the last question, and afterwards we go to the close down and a closing poll. Chris, can you answer the question of Max?
Yeah, so he's asking about the storytelling point to get engagement with the communities, right? No, I mean, it's absolutely essential that you take people with you, because one of the big stumbling blocks you have often in cities is that people are occupying land which is, illegal, and therefore cities don't want to engage with those communities. But at the same time, there's a lot of innovation in those communities. People are occupying difficult to occupy parts of the city often, and they're forging their own little microeconomies. They're very innovative people, and you need to get everybody on board if you're going to deal with the big issues. So it's a little bit of, but the storytelling is essential. You need the big picture storytelling, like what are the big city problems? And then you have to find what are the roles that everybody can and wants to play to contribute towards alleviating those roles. And when you can match the two together and excite the people to become part of the solution and encourage the local governments to allow them to take that role, then you have a better chance of tackling the big challenges, rather than when you go only from this top-down approach in the past, which doesn't work in fast-growing cities anymore.
Yeah, great. And with that, and the last comment of Romy Sandpoort that we can all fully agree with, I think, and that is greatly the reason of this lunch webinar actually, is how can we as Dutch organizations or multinational organizations employ our expertise to be part of the change that local people want to see. Well, that's, I think, what we have tried to address in this presentation. How can you do that? Why should you do that? To further inform you, I've posted some links in the chat towards the massive open online course of TU Delft on building with nature and building with people, the NL Inclusive Info Manual, and our websites. And Anna-Maria was so kind to also share a link more above in the chat. So for now, 5 minutes to 1, I would kindly thank you all for your time. We hope that we have given you a lot of food for thought during your lunch. We hope we inspired you, and we hope we have connected some of you to each other. To close this presentation, we would kindly ask you to fill in our exit poll, and we will try to do our best to answer some of the unanswered questions in the chat in a private email to you. So once again, thanks a lot, Chris, Anna-Maria, Jacobine, thanks a lot for your time as well. And hoping to see you in real life soon.